For nearly 13 years, a beautiful young nurse and single mom named Kimberly Long had been steadfastly proclaiming she didn't do it. Brutally bludgeoning her boyfriend, Ozzy Conde, to death in what the prosecution portrayed as a bloody crime of passion. And despite being sentenced to life in prison, many were convinced Kimberly was indeed innocent.
There's absolutely no forensic evidence that points to Kim as being the killer.
I mean, if I'm on the jury, I'm thinking this is an impossibility. I mean, this is not just a reasonable doubt, this is impossible.
She didn't murder Ozzy. She did not murder Ozzy.
Now, in a dramatic new development, Kimberly Long has just been released, but still faces the possibility of going back.
I had faith the whole time. I knew it was going to happen at some point. I just didn't know when.
So after 7 long years behind bars, what is it that has reopened the case? The Innocence Project is presenting new evidence that challenges the conviction. But Kimberly says Crime Watch Daily's investigation also played a role.
I'm very grateful for Crime Watch Daily. Thank you so much for doing this story. We appreciate it.
Kimberly may be out of prison, but she's not out of limbo, telling Billy Jensen, who led our investigation, she knows the prosecution could retry her again for killing the man she calls the love of her life, and that still terrifies her.
I have no understanding today why they picked me. I have no idea.
Kimberly is hardly the profile murderer, as her parents Roger and Darlene Long can attest.
What was Kim like as a child?
She was very mild-mannered. She grew up in a good home, taught her right from wrong. She was good in school. She was just a typical, normal little girl.
And at the time of Ozzy Conde's murder, she was a 27-year-old emergency room nurse and divorced mother of 2 young kids, aged 5 and 10. And Kim and Ozzy, who had been childhood sweethearts, were reunited, deeply in love again, and living happily together in the Los Angeles suburb of Corona after each had suffered failed first marriages.
When did you get the feeling that, okay, this is a guy that I could spend the rest of my life with?
I always felt that way about Ozzy. Even as kids, I thought for sure we were gonna, we'd be together. Maybe it was just because it was the first person I ever loved, I'm not sure. So just coming back around again, it just always felt right.
Kimberly's parents not only approved of Ozzy, a 31-year-old painter, they were thrilled their daughter had found true love.
I could see it on her face. I guess a mom knows these things. She was crazy about him. It's like everything started all over again.
They were kind of like the Brady Bunch.
He has 3 kids, and I had 2. So I was excited. I bought an expedition, to fit everybody in, so we can all go camping together. So I was really excited. I felt good about having a big family. I was looking forward to it.
But on the fateful day of October 5th, 2003, their dreams of a bright future together would explode when the couple decided to let their hair down while the kids were away with their other parents for the weekend.
We started about 10 o'clock that morning, I think. 10 or 11 o'clock, we were at Chugwagon. So, I started from there.
And continued to drink on an all-day bar-hopping bender.
How many drinks do you think you had that night?
I had a lot.
Guzzling beer nonstop, as well as 10 shots of hard liquor at one bar alone. And by the time Kimberly and Ozzy arrived at their last stop of the night, the Maverick Saloon, she was hammered and well-primed for a drunken late-night lover's tiff.
What happened at Mavericks?
We hung out, we danced, we had a good time, but Ozzy thought I was being too flirtatious. I talked to a lot of different people. I talked to everybody. And so an argument ensued. So I started getting irritated at him. I felt like he ruined my time.
They left the Maverick and continued to argue in the driveway of their home.
I told Ozzy I wasn't coming in, wanted him to leave. I threw stuff at him, threw my purse, just, did that whole, struggle thing in the driveway. And I told him that I wanted him to leave. He wasn't gonna leave, so I left.
With a friend named Jeff Dills, who had accompanied them home from the Maverick. Kimberly ended up in Dill's hot tub, before he dropped her back home again in the early hours of the morning.
So I walked into the house.
Kim says she was hoping she and Ozzy could kiss and make up.
I turned around, I shut the door, I called his name, I took off my shoes, or I kicked them off. I walked over to the light, I turned it on, and when I turned around, the first thing I saw was a big blood stain on the arm of the couch.
Then she saw Ozzy lying unconscious on the couch.
And he looked bruised and swollen, and there was blood everywhere on him. So I walked up to him, and I looked at him, and I called his name, and nothing happened. And when I was really looking at him, what I saw, I think that's when the panic hit, and I just started freaking out. And I ran in the kitchen, and I grabbed the phone, and I called 911.
I just came home. He's bloody. I don't know what's going on. He's still breathing. He's blood. Where's the blood at? Oh,
Did they tell you to do anything? Did they?
They asked me if I could help him.
And what happened?
I felt like it clicked, like screw it. Oh my God, you know, I'm gonna have to do this. And I remember taking off my jacket, and I remember reaching over and I grabbed Ozzy by his hand, because I'd figured like something's gonna arouse him. Something will arouse him. Get him by his hand, get him to like get up. But once I did that and he lifted up, he made a noise.
Known as the Death Rattle.
And that's when I just started screaming and I ran outside. And at that point, every cop car, every ambulance, everything showed up right in that moment.
First responders were shocked by what they found.
It was one of the more brutal scenes that I've seen in a long time. We were pretty much struck by the amount of blood that was in this room.
And Ozzy was dead at the scene from blunt force trauma to the head.
It seemed like all of the trauma came from the side, near his ear, near the back of the head. So he could have been just resting on the couch and being struck from behind.
Kimberly tells Crime Watch Daily's Billy Jensen these new details from the scene of the crime in her first national interview since being released from prison.
You know, they literally had to put me in the back of a cop car, trying to keep me in there, just trying to keep me calm.
Police take the 27-year-old nurse and single mom in for questioning at the station, where she is in despair and sobbing.
Everything's done in my life, you know, Ozzy's gone. Everything's horrible in that moment. Everything's horrible.
It's done, it's over. It's over. My whole life is over. He was my life. He was everything to me.
Kimberly admits to detectives they'd had a lover's tiff after a full day of heavy drinking, and that she'd gone to the home of friend Jeff Dills and ended up in his hot tub. But she insists she didn't murder her 31-year-old boyfriend.
I came home and he was dead on my couch.
And she points the finger of blame at one of Ozzy's ex-girlfriends.
It could only be her.
Just 1 month before Ozzy's murder, the ex-girlfriend had sent Kimberly a poisoned pen letter that was included in police evidence files. And in the letter, she tauntingly claimed she'd recently slept with Ozzy. And she admits in this polygraph test that she had threatened Kimberly.
What did you say to Kim? I wish I could kill her. Okay. I wish I could keep her out.
Kimberly had also submitted to a lie detector test just hours after her initial police interrogation.
Did you lie to me when you said that you have no knowledge of the person or persons who killed your boyfriend?
No. I knew I didn't do anything. I mean, I had no problems taking this exam.
Probability of you being deceptive is less than 0.01%. As far as I'm concerned, this lady's telling me the truth.
And while the ex-girlfriend's polygraph is declared inconclusive, Kimberly passes with flying colors.
It wasn't going to come out any other way. I mean, there's no sigh of relief, there's no nothing. It's, yeah, now what? Now go get the person that did it.
The ex-girlfriend denies having anything to do with Ozzy's murder and has an alibi, as does Kimberly's ex-husband, who had also been investigated. The ex-girlfriend also sent Crime Watch Daily this statement, reading in part, "I am completely disgusted with Kimberly's defense team, who has gone above and beyond to poke holes in testimony and publicly deflect blame of Ozzy's death onto innocent people, myself included. Since the moment Ozzy passed away, I have fully cooperated with investigators and have done everything they asked." And at the time of the investigation, police seemed convinced Kimberly is the murderer.
When did it click to you that, oh my God, they think I did this?
It was the way they started talking to me.
I don't like the way you said that.
Well, I apologize, but what do you want us to do?
I had realized in that moment that they were gonna blame me for this.
Then, a couple of days later, the cops make their move.
They called me and they said, "We have a lineup and we want you to see it. Can you meet us?" I said, "I have to take my son to school, to kindergarten, so I'll do it after." They said, "No, you should just probably come now. It'll only take a second."
Kimberly tells for the first time how police asked her to meet them at a McDonald's near her home in the Los Angeles suburb of Corona, only to be surprised in the parking lot by one of them.
And he grabbed me and he said, "I'm putting you under arrest for the murder of Ozzy." And then I heard my son screaming in the car.
So did they put the cuffs on you in front of your son?
Yeah, they did. You know, that's had repercussions on my son his whole life.
Kimberly is charged with second-degree murder, despite the fact that police have no hard evidence linking her to the crime.
They didn't do any investigating in this case. They've done nothing. The officers did nothing. The detectives did nothing to try to figure anything out. They just pointed at me.
There is some vindication when Kimberly's first trial ends with a hung jury, but at her retrial, a jury astonishingly finds her guilty.
I know the bailiff was shocked. I think the judge was shocked. The court reporter was shocked. You can't believe it.
In fact, the judge publicly disagrees with the verdict.
He said that he would have found me innocent if it was a bench trial.
But by law, the judge has no choice but to sentence her to 15 years to life.
When you were sitting in prison, how often did you think, I still can't believe I'm here?
All the time. Anytime that I had a moment at quietness, I did. It came rushing back. I stayed as busy as possible, but when I had downtime or when things were going bad, it just reminded me that I'm wrongfully convicted sitting in prison.
Kimberly would languish behind bars for more than 7 years before her case comes to the attention of the California Innocence Project, which defends those believed to have been wrongly convicted.
I mean, if I'm on the jury, I'm thinking this is an impossibility. I mean, this is not just a reasonable doubt, this is impossible.
Innocence Project investigator Bill Sylvester and attorney Alyssa Biercole feel confident they can set Kimberly free.
There's absolutely no forensic evidence that points to Kim as being the killer.
The prosecution had claimed Kimberly killed Ozzy with an object like a baseball bat or golf club. But the murder weapon was never found, and most confounding, no blood was found on Kimberly or her clothes, even though first responders were stunned by the amount of blood at the crime scene.
Gosh, as we went in, we noticed that it was just on every surface of almost every article in the room. It was on the floors, it was on the walls, it was on the curtains. There was blood, gosh, almost 10 feet away from us, going into other rooms.
It was impossible not to have his blood on her.
But the prosecution had hung their case on the timeline evidence of Jeff Dills, who told police he had dropped Kimberly home around 1:30 a.m. on the night of the murder, contradicting Kimberly, who had said it was around 2 a.m., just minutes before she had called 911.
I just came home. He's bloody. I don't know what's going on. He's still bleeding. Something's wrong.
The prosecution argues that disputed half an hour would have given her enough time to murder Ozzy and dispose of the evidence. And the defense can't dispute Dill's timeline because in a tragic twist of fate, he'd been killed in a motorcycle accident before Kimberly went on trial.
I was absolutely shocked. I was devastated by the whole thing. We couldn't cross-examine him. There was nothing more that we could do. It's a dead man's testimony at this point, and they took it as gold.
Then a key turning point in the case. The Innocence Project's investigation finds 2 independent time-of-death experts who support Kimberly's timeline.
We have 2 doctors, they're medical examiners, and both of them have said that Ozzy was dead long before Kim got home. They placed the time of death around midnight or 12:30, not at 1:30 even, best case scenario, according to the prosecution's timeline.
So they're now armed with enough evidence to show Kimberly didn't kill Ozzy. She passes the polygraph. The murder weapon was never found. There's no blood on her clothes. And experts can now show she wasn't even home when Ozzy was murdered. And as the Innocence Project fights to win Kimberly a new trial, friends and family lead rallies calling for justice. And Crime Watch Daily brings her case to national attention for the first time with our own investigation.
Did you watch that in prison?
I did. Everybody watched it.
And what was that like to watch that?
I cried because I didn't know how it was going to come across. People were yelling, "Free Kimberly Long," believe it or not. It was really fantastic.
Just 9 months after we aired our investigation, a judge finally overturns Kimberly's murder conviction, setting her free on $50,000 bail pending a new trial. And Kimberly walks out of court into the waiting arms of overjoyed friends and family.
This was a wonderful moment. Now my daughter is going to come home.
I knew I was going to walk out. I had faith the whole time. I knew it was going to happen at some point. I just didn't know when. I'm excited, very excited about everything.
Thanks to the tenacious attorneys of the California Innocence Project, with a little help from Crime Watch Daily.
I'm so grateful. How do you pay that back?
Today, Kimberly's new life is just beginning, starting all over again, back at her parents' house, where she's been ever since that dramatic ruling set her free.
I waited for that moment for so long. I always thought about how it would be, what I was going to be doing, what I was going to be saying, how it was going to feel, and it wasn't any of those things. I still didn't believe it was really happening.
Neither did her mom.
It's almost unbelievable. It's like a dream, and only the dream is real.
God. That's my girl.
But the most precious gift of all for Kimberly is being reunited with her 2 children.
When it comes to the kids, it's very emotional. My kids were 5 and 10, and now they're 18 and 23.
And Kim literally thanks God for her freedom.
I pray every day, every single day.
Right.
I went back to my church.
She says it was only her faith that helped her withstand the horrors of prison.
I knew God was He was gonna get me home, and my faith carried me.
But Kimberly tells our Billy Jensen she doesn't have faith cops will ever catch Ozzy's real killer. In fact, the state of California is still considering retrying her for her boyfriend's murder.
If you remain free, that means a killer is still out there. Are you going to attempt to try and find that killer?
No.
Why not?
Where do you begin? And it's not my job. The cops should have done their job.
But she doesn't believe they ever will.
My opinion is that they will never look for anybody else, that they will believe that it was me. I don't believe they will ever admit that they were wrong and they had made a mistake at this point.
The district attorney has filed an appeal and tells us in part we cannot provide any information which might impact those proceedings or potentially affect the fairness of a possible retrial. And here to help us break this case down is defense attorney and Fox News contributor Evany Kay Williams. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chris.
What are your initial thoughts on this?
It looks like a glaring lack of evidence to me, Chris. She was convicted for essentially 2 reasons. First, her alibi witness contradicted the time of drop-off that she asserted. That was a big problem for her at trial. Also, the prosecutors relied on the fact that it was a very bloody crime scene and she would have been covered with blood. She, of course, was found with no blood on her whatsoever. And they said that she threw the mysterious bloody clothes away, and the jury bought that. So those were 2 things that they relied on to convict, but they're very thin pieces of evidence.
As a defense lawyer, how would you have done things differently?
Well, I would have harped on the fact that this alibi witness who contradicted Kim's account was never cross-examined. He passed away prior to trial, and so he was never subject to cross-examination. And that makes his testimony inherently unreliable. So if I'm her defense lawyer, Chris, I'm harping on that as much as they want to point to that as real evidence, it's not trustworthy.
What should her defense team be focusing on now?
If I'm her defense team, I'm going to focus on the fact that, yes, she's acquitted for the time being, but she's always subject to being retried. I would want to get in front of that, and I would seek a motion to find her factually innocent. And this is not easy to do, but it's certainly a possibility, because here there was DNA that was found after the trial, real reasons her conviction was overturned, and you can get a judge to say, you know what, there's enough evidence here that we not only find you not guilty, but innocent.
But that's pretty hard to do.
Very difficult. It's very rare.
But you'd give it a shot.
I would give it a shot here. I think it's worth a real try.
Do you think she gets tried again?
I think without that, Chris, she could. She absolutely could, because prosecutors don't like unresolved cases.
Prosecutors want to make this case.
Absolutely they do.
Evany, thank you as always for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
For more information on the Kimberly Long case, go to crimewatchdaily.com.